correct.
Okay.
So, dear panelists, dear colleagues, it's already 2 p.m. Geneva time, 3 p.m. in Nairobi. I suggest that though attendees are still joining, we formally launch this event. Excellencies, dear delegates, dear members of the scientific community, dear colleagues, welcome to this online event organized by the Secretariat of the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group on a Science Policy Panel to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution in collaboration with the Geneva Environment Network. This event aims at presenting the Science Policy Panel to the wide scientific community, including the current state of the negotiations, as well as the different ways in which scientists across the world can take part in the work of the future panel. Our online gathering this afternoon also complements a series of events that we have organized in the run-up to the 3 negotiation sessions to establish this panel since the adoption at the United Nations Environment Assembly back in 2022 of a series of landmark historical resolutions, including the one that decided to convene the Ad Hoc Open-Ended Working Group. In the context of the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, 2 intergovernmental bodies to help policymakers taking the right decisions have been set up for 2 of these crises. And we are joined by leading experts that are engaged in these processes. Many of you also regularly engage in these. And as you will hear more in detail soon, the United Nations Environment Assembly resolution adopted 2.5 years ago aims at setting up a science policy panel for the 3rd crisis on chemicals, waste, and pollution. The working group that was established following the adoption of the resolution was expected to conclude its substantive discussions on proposals for the establishment of the panel last June. As you will hear by the Secretariat, the proposals are now expected to be finalized next year. This afternoon, we are delighted to be joined by Andrea Inwood, the Chief Scientist of the United Nations Environment Programme, to chair and moderate this event. And before handing over to Ms. Inwood, I would like to add that the Geneva Environment Network is celebrating its 25th anniversary in the last quarter of this year. The event you are attending today kicks off a series of events exploring and highlighting frameworks and partnerships that can strengthen environmental governance. For those who are not familiar with the Geneva Environment Network, let me add that it is a pivotal platform of international Geneva, generating participate and engagement for increased collaboration among stakeholders for stronger environmental governance in the fight against the triple planetary crisis. We are thrilled to kick off the series of events leading to a final in-person celebration of our important milestone in December in Geneva with this session, engaging with the scientific community and moderated by the UNEP chief scientist. We need the scientific community to help policymakers to set priorities and to monitor progress for science-based and strengthened decision-making, leading to stronger environmental governance. Now, as I'm handing over to our chair moderator, let me also remind all our attendees that the documents, video, and summary of this event will be made available as usual on our website. You can find the link on the screen and in the chat of this event. And throughout the event, you can raise your questions by using the Q&A box, and we will answer these in the dedicated session at the end of the presentations. You can also see on the screen that there is an available transcript in various languages. So follow the indications there on how to access it. So with that, Ms. Inwood, over to you.
Thanks very much, Diana, and thanks to the Geneva Environment Network, and congratulations on 25 years. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session on strengthening science engagement in this development of a science policy panel to address chemicals, pollution, and waste. And when established, this particular science policy panel will focus on the sound management of chemicals and the prevention of pollution and waste. There are thousands of chemicals in use. I think we all know that, in products, and they result in human and environmental exposures with many unknown risks associated with them at this point in time. And the question, of course, arises in terms of how much is too much in soil, water, air, food, in ourselves. And again, for some chemicals, we know this. For some pollutants, we know this. For others, we don't. The issue of pollution and waste is multifaceted. We have a lot of knowledge in particular areas like air pollution, but there are many other areas where we have a lack of data on information on environmental exposures and certainly on how humans are exposed and what the impacts might be when we do establish that exposure is occurring. And we're living in a context of increasing chemical usage, of increasing knowledge about pollution and waste, and of course, the need for science to help answer some of these questions about risk, impact, hazard generally, what type of exposure is happening. If you are exposed, again, how much is too much? And of course, this is multidisciplinary. This is not just a particular type of science. It covers a whole range, even through to the socioeconomic type considerations. And so this session today, we're very fortunate because we bring together people who've been working on the Science Policy Panel and can update you on where things are with negotiations, but also experienced scientists who've been engaged with other panels and have also been engaged in this process. And I'm looking forward to hearing about some of their experiences, but also their advice on how we can better engage science to make sure that when we have a science policy panel, we have the most robust, credible and quality science to inform policies. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Tessa Govers, who's the Principal Coordinator of the Secretariat. She's going to explain what the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution Prevention is and what the current state of negotiations are. Thanks, Tessa.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this introduction. And it's a true pleasure to have you all attending today's webinar. In my introduction, I indeed would like to explain a bit further what is this science policy panel that we are discussing here and what it is all about, how the process started, and also what the current status is of the negotiations. So if you go to the next slide, as many of you know, we are currently facing a triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity and nature loss, and pollution and waste issues. There are important linkages between these three pillars, and the crisis is largely driven by unsustainable consumption and production. When it comes to climate change, we have for long turned for scientific evidence to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, which was established in 1988. When it comes to biodiversity and nature loss, we have since 2012 turned to the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES. However, a similar global comprehensive science policy interface is currently lacking for pollution-related issues. And the new panel that we are discussing today, for now referred to as the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and the Prevention of Pollution, aims at structuring a strong science policy interface on the third, often a bit overlooked pillar of pollution and waste of the triple planetary crisis. Next slide. The decision to establish the Science Policy Panel was adopted in March 2022 by the UN Environment Assembly, which is the equivalent of the General Assembly for the United Nations Environment Programme, where all environment ministers from around the world meet and decide on concerted action to tackle environmental issues. It's referred to as UNEA Resolution 5/8, and it provides us with a mandate to work on the creation of this panel. Key features set out in the resolution include this decision that a science policy panel should be established to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. And also that the panel should be an independent intergovernmental body with a program of work approved by its member governments to deliver policy-relevant scientific evidence without being policy prescriptive. And these are key elements that are guiding our work. Next slide. In the ongoing negotiations, the envisioned objective of the panel is to strengthen the science policy interface to contribute to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution for the protection of human health and the environment. And to reach this objective, government representatives defined 5 functions for the panel: undertaking horizon scanning, conducting assessments, providing up-to-date information, identifying gaps, supporting communications and raising public awareness, facilitating information sharing, and integrating capacity building into all functions and the work of the panel to strengthen the science policy interface. And you can find the full descriptions of these 5 functions in the documentation on our website. To set up a strong science policy panel, governments are also taking into account the lessons learned from existing science policy panels, such as IPCC and IPBES, but also from the International Resource Panel, the Global Environment Outlook, panels under the Montreal Protocol, and others as relevant. Next slide. To establish the science policy panel, a process has been put in place based on the requests and guidance provided in the UNEA Resolution 5/8. An ad hoc open-ended working group was established to prepare proposals for the science policy panel, including on its institutional design, rules, and processes. The open-ended working group is composed of governments and regional economic integration organizations and is open to observers from United Nations entities, relevant multilateral agreements, other international instruments and intergovernmental bodies, and stakeholder representatives. The Open-Ended Working Group, or OEWG, began its work in October 2022 in Nairobi, Kenya, with the ambition of completing the work by the end of this year. Next slide. On 17th of June this year, the 3rd session of the Open-Ended Working Group was opened in Geneva, Switzerland. For 5 days, the Open-Ended Working Group negotiated key documents, including the foundational document, which contains elements on the science policy panel's functions and governance structure, the draft rules of procedure and draft work program related processes, and so on. And despite making significant progress, delegates were unable to finalize the work. A resumed session, OEW 3.2, will therefore be held in the first part of 2025 with the aim to finalize the key documents, enabling the establishment and operationalization of the science policy panel. It was decided that a resumed session of OEW 3 will be organized back-to-back with an intergovernmental meeting to consider the establishment of the science policy panel. And this would then allow the convening of the first session of the governing body of the panel in the following months, and thus launching the substantive work of the science policy panel. Next slide. Scientist participation is crucial to ensuring that the panel meets its objective and supports governments to take informed decisions based on science. A broad diversity of scientists will be central to ensure that the panel's work is solution-oriented, interdisciplinary, as it will need to draw from and speak to all relevant sectors, including, for example, the health sector. Mobilize all relevant forms of knowledge, including indigenous and traditional knowledge, is inclusive and has regional and gender balance. There are several ways for the broader scientific community to get involved in the work of the Open-Ended Working Group and the Science Policy Panel itself once established. For this, I will hand over to my colleague Zanyun Wang, who will explain further the different ways in which scientists can get involved. Thank you, and back to you, Andrea.
If I can just introduce Zanyun Wang. He's an associate expert at the SPP Secretariat, and he's going to talk about the ways in which scientists, scientific institutions, networks, journals can all get involved. Sanyun, I can't see you on my screen, but I hope you're there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea, for your introduction. Also, many thanks to the organizers, to Geneva Environment Network, for hosting today's webinar. In preparing this, we're also looking into how the scientists may participate in the different international science policy interfaces. I would like just to briefly show some of the opportunities, both during the current OEWG process, like negotiating how the future science policy panel on chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention would look like, and more importantly, to encourage the scientists to participate in the panel's work once it's established. So we started with the scientist participation during the OEWG phase. They're also both both direct ways and also indirect ways. So we would very much like encourage you really to raise the awareness of this panel, this future panel among your peers and the scientific networks, so that more scientists would learn about the panel, so that they can get them familiarized with the future panel and also start to learn about how to get involved. One important pathways could be to consult national focal points. These are the designated national contact points in the government and observers, and you can find the list of these on the SPP website. So both you can learn about what the scientists can learn about what are the key priorities for the national governments and to support them, but also that the scientists can also bring your views, your perspectives, your evidence to the national focal points and observers to support their negotiation, to create such a bidirectional dialogue. And also more importantly, you could also participate in OEWG 3.2 on-site to provide the on-site support. Of course, we also understand that scientists are generally very busy. There's also indirect engagements could be through the publication. And also, I think the OEWG process will hopefully conclude very soon. And most importantly is for scientists to really participate in the panel's work. The previous slide, please. So there are also two ways. One is the direct engagement, one is the indirect engagement. Similar to the previous one is that, please do raise awareness of the panel among your peers and the networks, and consult the national focal point observers to exchange views, to provide support, and also learn about what are the key issues that the scientists can contribute. And also prior to the meetings of the panel's governing body, scientific networks may provide written or joint, individual or joint written submissions subject to kind of the rules and procedures negotiated as the outcomes of the OEWG process. And of course, that scientists are very encouraged to participate in the meetings of the panel's governing body as observers, and more importantly, as authors, information and data contributors, and all reviewers in the panel's work. We're really grateful that today we will have two speakers also from the IPCC and IPBES scientists who have been involved in these two panels' work to share really their experience. And you will hear more details about these opportunities later. The next slide, please. And then, of course, there also are indirect ways to engage, including generate and publish relevant data and knowledge, organizing special issues in scientific journals, hosting expert workshops, meetings, and also really to conduct work contributing to the panel's objective and functions, like addressing these knowledge gaps identified panel, translating and disseminating the panel's outputs, fostering uptake of deliverables by policy and decision makers, and also conducting capacity building based on the deliverables. So these are some of these opportunities that we have observed like in other international science policy interfaces, and we will hear more now from some of these scientists who have worked at the forefront of these other international science policy panels, also from the scientists and networks working on chemicals and waste and pollution prevention. So thank you so much, and yeah, go back to Andrea.
Thanks, Zanyun. That's been terrific. So just before I hand over to two of our experts from the IPCC and IPBES, I would just like to remind you that if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will do our best to get through as many as possible at the end. We will have an opportunity to discuss these things. Thanks. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Ada Diongu-Niang. She's a meteorologist and climatologist and is the current vice chair of the IPCC's Working Group 1 for the 7th assessment cycle. Can I hand over to you, Ada? Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me today. I would like to share my perspective based on my experience as lead author in the previous IPCC assessment cycle, R6. Next slide, please. Yes, to start, I would like to share quickly the IPCC structure to show how authors fit in a scientific in a science policy panel such as IPCC. As is a science policy panel, you have the IPCC, you have the panel here, materialized by policy makers representing the government, your IPCC panel, and then you have the bureau and the executive committee, which has a leadership role in IPCC management and in the assessment, and supported by the permanent IPCC secretariat, which has also enabling, supportive, and management role. You have the 3 working groups you may know and the task force of IPCC. But what is really important to point out is that the assessment work is done by authors. Usually in a science policy panel, you have coordinating lead authors, coordinating chapters, lead authors, drafting assessment in the chapter. Lead author may ask to contributing authors to contribute for a specific element of the assessment, usually figures or a specific topic. And you have also review editors to ensure the consistency of the chapter. And for the early career scientists, what is interesting is to have chapter scientists. Usually they are PhD students or early career scientists. And authors are selected by bureau here in the case of IPCC based on criteria such as diversity of expertise is important, but also ensuring geographical balance and gender balance also is important. Next, please. Yeah, just here to show an example of authors that contribute to the 2 previous IPCC cycle. Here you have the total number of authors for each cycles, and also the proportion of authors from developing and developed countries, and proportion of female author versus male author. Next slide, please. And now, responding to the questions, first one is how to identify a research gap. As you may know, science policy panels do not conduct their own research. they assess the knowledge on the basis of existing literature or knowledge. And it's important to point that it's a given point in time because knowledge and literature evolve. And what I found really helpful is identifying the knowledge gap using the report in the previous cycle. But I understand that for this science policy panels that going to be set up, it would be the first time, so we would not have such report. But as a scientist, you know that identify research gap could be done through literature review and analysis, including on conflict findings, unanswered questions, or limited studies. But there is a caveat on it, particularly for authors coming from some developing countries, many developing countries actually. The problem is access to literature. During the assessment, we will provide a UNEP help desk email address. It was usually useful, but many times it was very challenging, particularly when we were already engaged in the assessment. Because what happens is that you send a request, you wait a couple of days, having the journal you ask for, and while you are doing the assessment, you need to have access to other journals. But what I found also helpful was subscribing to some journals with very low fees for science from developing countries. I don't know if they exist for each topic, but for meteorology and climate topics, we have the IMS journals for a very low fee, $1 a year for authors from developing countries. I think this is an issue to be sought out in advance of the evaluation exercise to ensure that to ensure an equitable access to literature for all authors involved in the assessment. And as scientists, I'm not saying nothing new, mentioning that we need to have more interactions with peers. What I really found interesting is having also interactions with scientists in related fields. For example, we talk climate, we have scientists in oceanography, science in meteorology, scientists in other climate-related fields. And this is important, interact with them to have a broader view and to better identify research gaps. And also, I think also interacting with practitioners, policymakers could help to be more aware of the real world, if I can say that, and also knowing more about research gaps that are policy relevant and socially driven. Next, please. Now, how to prepare a research project and scientific publications that could be used by the panel. So doing policy relevant research in the field, in the topics mentioned, I think it's important for a science policy panel. And in any way, research to advance knowledge gap is important. And if you can attend also specific conference or expert meeting in a specific area, for example, in the case of IPCC, usually at the beginning of the cycle, some conference are convened or expert meeting in order to get the scientific community to be aware of some challenges that we face. So if you could attend this meeting or have the outcomes of these meetings, it's helpful also. And these are done usually before the scoping meeting or, I mean, during the cycle. But what happened also is that after the scoping meetings provides guidelines for drafting the report. Some topics may emerge with limited peer review literature on which authors can be based for the assessment, and researchers are encouraged to publish more literature. And for that also, we need to be aware of cutoff date. And this process might be biased also because some scientists which face some structural research problems such as research infrastructure, access to data, and little collaboration within their country or within their region, will not able to publish as quickly as others who are not facing these challenges. And also, authors engaged in the assessment may publish their own research while they are drafting the chapter. Journal, there is no problem, but you can have also some ethics problem, including unbalanced self-citation that you might see in assessment reports. Next, please. How one can contribute to the organization of the scientific communities. Yes, I'm totally in line with what has been presented by Mr. Wang, and direct engagement is important, and awareness raising about informing about the assessment process and the different way to contribute is important, and also encouraging or promoting science, promoting collaboration within the science community is important. Collaborative research may be interdisciplinary research, multidisciplinary research, as it has stressed. These are major problems that we are tackling, and we cannot do it in silos. It's important to have to promote multidisciplinary research and to publish research results and other type of knowledge relevant to your own regions, because it's important also to have regional perspective and to be aware that science policy panels assessment could be only based on published literature on existing documents. Next, please. Next. So it's my last diapositive, and the question, or with all that, I think there is something that no, sorry, it's my last diapositive. You're right. And with all this, what does it? No, sorry, it's not my last diapositive. Excuse me. It's no, yeah, before, please. Yeah, previous diapositive, please. Previous one. Yeah. What does it entail to be an author? It's important to know that we are engaging as author in a voluntary basis, and there is a commitment that we are having. We need to dedicate time, including sometimes evenings, weekends, and holidays. And the commitment depends on the assessment cycle and its reports and how long each report will take. And what's another thing that is really important, it taking the responsibility being an author, because the authors are responsible of the context of the content of their report. If you are lead author, the content of the report lies on your shoulders. And it's important also to know when to communicate, what to communicate, and how, and in which capacity. For instance, you cannot disclose some elements of a report before the report is approved, for example. And when communicate, you need to be clear yourself if you are communicate in your capacity as a scientist or your capacity as an author of the science policy panel. And also be aware that assessment is different from literature review. And usually there is a specific language. For example, in the case of IPCC, we have a calibrated language to say how robust the finding is, for example. And I think it has been also mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, that it's important to have in mind the principle of policy relevant information and not policy perspective. And it should be also materialized in the language we use in drafting the report. Another thing important also is that it's an international panel, so it's a multicultural setting with people from different backgrounds, and there is a respect of a code of conduct we need to have. And also we should think about inclusiveness and equity when we are working in such a setting. Next, please. This time is my last slide. So with that, will you engage with a science policy panel? From my perspective, contributing in a science policy panel is really rewarding, because you are contributing and you are contributing to tackle major problems that humanity is facing, either climate change, biodiversity loss, waste and pollution are real important problems. And also, it is an opportunity for growth. You will learn a lot of things working along with renowned scientists and having a broader view of the problem. And you acquire knowledge, but also the human interactions we are having is very beneficial. And also you can, networking, I mentioned it also. And I think importantly, it's the legitimacy to talk about something. If you are an author of a science policy panel, from my side, I felt that I was very legitimate to talk about climate change assessment, because usually what I did before I was IPCC author, I used IPCC material to talk about IPCC findings, but being author made me more legitimate in my sense to talk about the assessment. Thank you, and I'm waiting for questions.
Thanks, Ada. We're going to get to the questions at the end of all of our panelists. So thanks very much, and I'm sure everyone is giving you a virtual clap. So if we can now turn to the Intergovernmental Science Policy Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, we're very privileged to have Dr. Marie Stensecki. She's a professor in human geography, and she's worked with IPBES for many years and is a former co-chair between 2015 and 2022. Marie, welcome. Take it away.
Many thanks, and thanks for inviting me to give my glimpses of IPBES. And I think I will fit nicely to Aida's introduction of the formal work. I will build on her last slide, so to speak, because IPBES has borrowed a lot of the settings from how IPCC worked, since we're a younger organization, and IPCC did a lot good. So this is the group that I was co-chairing. It wasn't the whole IPBES, but it was the scientific panel that we're tasked to oversee the scientific quality. We're slightly different from IPCC in that respect, but still. And you see we're happy. I will show you some pictures. And next, please. Starting off then where Aida finished with attractions of working in what is labeled as global environmental assessments, of which IPCC's work and IPBES's work are some, and the one starting up now on chemical pollution will also be one. And surely it's intellectually stimulating in a broad sense, as was spelled out by Aida. You kind of broadens your perspective on the issue you're working on from your kind of scientific angle. So that's really an interesting journey to make. And it's also very stimulating to produce applicable knowledge with a potential to make change. Next slide, please. And to the left is a picture on the approval of the IPBES global assessment, the kind of the flagship of IPBES. We are soon starting on working on a second global assessment, kind of equals to this 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 that IPCC has done. You see the joy among the authors, working hard for a number of years, approved by the plenary, the representatives for the government. And this assessment that was approved in May 2019, it was cited all over. There was we kind of checked the press. There was on TV, radio, the big journals in all countries, all over the world. I shouldn't say all, but many countries. I mean, BBC, the big channels of US and China and India and so on. So it's really made an impact, and later assessments but done too, but not to this huge extent that the IPBES global assessment really did. So and that was the first one. So of course we were happy that it could be kind of quickly catching up with the fame of IPCC, so to speak. On the right side is what was agreed in the Global Biodiversity Framework in Montreal, the Montreal Protocol of the Convention on Biodiversity, which is kind of the politically negotiated document which sets standards or obligation. I shouldn't say obligation, where the countries commit themselves to how to work with the biodiversity in the policies. And I've underlined a couple of terms in the and then taken out some goals and targets from that text that shows that the language of IPBES that came from IPBES assessment, very much from the global, but also from other more thematic assessments done by IPBES, certainly flavors very much the language in this. So this is to show that it really makes an impact, and it's really satisfying to see that the hard work and also kind of communicating science into policy really pays in these global environmental assessments. Next. Thank you. I would also say, I mean, there's many say that work in interdisciplinary and with these kinds of work might not be helping your academic career, but I would like to dispute that. It certainly enhances interesting career options, and I see them among many of the colleagues from IPBES. Not the least colleagues from the global south that kind of become visible and become part of networks that also brings them into to projects that comes from the more kind of funding rich countries, but that crucially needed an assessment on biodiversity, that there's a joint work. So, and this is of course, like Aida was saying, it's a clear ambition to have a regional balance and a gender balance and a disciplinary balance. Just next, this is not next picture. Not to sell myself, and I was in this kind of the group that oversee the work, and we selected the authors still. And managed to be into a number of publications. So just to show that surely if you work with such a global environmental assessment, that will pay off also in kind of your publication CV. I mean, these are so, well, I'm happy for this list, but I know that those have been working like authors in the various assessments certainly have an even longer one, because they based on the assessments, they then, when it's published, continue to publish on the materials they have developed. Next one, please. And the last on attractions is shortly echoing Ida. It contributes to a broad network inside and outside academia. So I mean, you say career options might not only be in academia, but you also get interesting connections outside academia. And then, not to be forgotten, you get friends and colleagues all over the globe in a fascinating way, and you learn the kind of richness of the globe, not just kind of what it looks like physically, but also the various culture, various ways of being. So having said that, next one. Just to be prepared for, this is not to say it's not what, but just to be prepared for and bring with you your listening skills and your willingness to learn and to be challenged, because you will work with people from various disciplines and various culture and various scientific traditions. And to make it a good joint work, you need to be willing to learn and to listen to others and sometimes challenge your own kind of what you think is the right way of doing things, but you might come up with something even better together. And that also goes with the next one. And have an attitude to cooperate. There will be surely, no, sorry, you will meet differences between you, but don't see those as a problem. You need to be flexible in approaches and have some patience in also explaining your own kind of position and your own knowledge. Next, please. Just some examples from one of the IPBES assessment on sustainable use of wild species. They had to start quite early on when this was given, when approved to do this assessment by the plenary. But then they need to discuss what is wild, what is use, what is sustainable use, evident terms we could say, but surely not when you try to make it scientific equality from many various kinds of ways of engaging with the rest of nature, with wild animals. You have feral animals, you have ways of people interacting with wild species that you even couldn't think of, and they need to kind of to make they needed to make a picture of what they really was studying. Next, please. As a social scientist, both in IPBES and IPCC are kind of shortage, and that there's needs to be making certain effort to get into these assessments. But those of you that are social scientists, I just want to stress that you are crucially important, because when we need to make peace with nature, as Guterres said, the General Secretary, it's humans that kind of need to adapt. It's not nature itself. So we need knowledge on societal drivers, legal rights, justice, governance, implementation, regional context, communication, and so on. So you're very much needed, the social scientists and humanities of you out there. Next, please. And just one thing that we did in IPBES was a kind of conceptual evolution that showed that how engaging with the social scientists meant that there was some concepts that needed to be changed to broaden the view, and also kind of addressing in a more scientifically correct way how we relate to the next rest of nature. So I won't tell you in detail. This is just an illustration that we qualified the human nature relations kind of perspective, working with IPBES in an interdisciplinary way. Next, please. Some challenges to SSH means social science humanities engagement is that those global environmental assessments kind of still is set very much for natural science. So be aware that those you need to see how you can adapt to the other disciplines, and also to indigenous and local knowledge. That in IPBES has been very important to bring in other knowledge systems, and that could go for concepts and frameworks that kind of seems to be okay. These are very commonly used, but might be questions when you bring in qualitative social scientists, when you bring in issues of justice and the business perspectives and ethics and so on. It might also be that the organization structures, you need to kind of adapt and see how these work together with a broadened scientific perspective, an interdisciplinary perspective, a multi-knowledge perspective. And sometimes the natural focal points typically situated in natural science context, and that kind of needs to be a training as well, not only by the scientist. I should also admit that among the social science humanities communities, there might be a skepticism regarding possibilities to participate and contribute on equal terms with experts from the dominating research field in those global environmental assessments. So that also needs to be handled to really make your platform attractive to them. And my final slide is just to show, next please, how one of the solution in IPBES was that some of us, I should say, created a social science humanities network that kind of both for authors within IPBES, but also others doing critical studies on IPBES. And we have had seminars and discussed joint papers and so on, and workshops to kind of strengthen the social science humanities engagement in the global environmental assessments. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Marie. That was terrific. And again, virtual clap from everybody. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Camilla Alexander-White, who's going to talk about how the Royal Society of Chemistry has coordinated engagement of their global network of scientists in the open-ended working group and how they plan to do so in the future. And Camilla works for the Royal Society of Chemistry and is a lead policy advisor on international chemicals policy. Thanks, Camilla.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea, and thanks to the organisers for inviting me today. As Andrea says, I'm lead policy advisor. So I've been attending the open-ended working group meetings over the last couple of years. But I just want to give you a flavour about how I come and where I come from on this. So today I'm just going to talk for 10 minutes or so about the different scientific skills and expertise that we see are needed to strengthen the science policy interface, and also talk about how we engage with our membership and the wider scientific community on what is a new panel now. It's really great to follow the previous two speakers to hear their experiences and all those things about interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinary expertise that really do matter here in chemicals, waste and pollution. So we have a web page that you can look at on the RSC's platform to get more details about our work on this, which has been ongoing for about 5 to 6 years now. We have that aim to solve the world's major challenges in this space, particularly on chemicals, waste and pollution. And, you know, we are a network of networks in that sense. And although we're based in the United Kingdom, we've got a history in the United Kingdom. We are actually an international society. We've got more than 56,000 members now worldwide. And we structure the scientific community into interest groups and science communities. So there are more than 70 interest groups. Each interest group might have 100 scientists within it. Each community might have a few thousand members in it. And we have an environmental chemistry community that's got about 5,000 members in it today. And so when we're trying to make the world a better place and to contribute the science the best we can, to make that happen, we engage with international science and policy communities, and we share what we know and we listen to what our members have to say to us. And so we have engagement events, we have focus groups. And so when myself and now Professor Tom Welton comes along to the open-ended working group meetings to set up a new science policy planning, we're coming on the back of having many discussions and conversations and engagement sessions with our broad membership base. So next slide, please. So all the work that we've done on the chemicals policy panel has also sat within our work, our broader work on a chemical strategy for a sustainable chemicals revolution. And that was organised under 4 pillars: education, innovation, circular economy and regulation. And we were reading the Global Chemicals Outlook 2 report from 2019 and saying, oh my goodness, you know, the targets and the goals here have not been met. What can we do as scientists? We must ensure that if chemical production is going to double in the next decade up to 2030, please, pollution must not double as well. So our scientists got engaged with these topics and we've had engagement with them. And we see the enablers on the bottom right of this slide of sharing research, sharing new knowledge, bringing the evidence to the table, sharing data as best as we can, having skills and a workforce that understands how to manage chemicals better, and also looking to the future as well. It's about having strategies for the safety evaluation of large numbers of chemicals that currently don't have adequate information, and also that look to innovative and advanced materials. So in the UK as well, as I say, we're based in the UK. We work as scientists quite closely with UK policymakers to devise strategies around looking to the decades ahead. And so our work on the UN SPP has been in that bigger context about how do we bring the best science to the table? How do we have the right scientists at the right table at the right time with the best evidence, and also the eye on the horizon for the innovations that are there to be implemented so that the best policy can be made. Next slide, please. So in that context, we keep a broad view on what's happening, and the advance report has just come out from the Geneva session, and this is where we're at. And so we see a lot in those reports, and we've heard in the previous two talks, you need broad expertise, broad stakeholder engagement, including people from Indigenous peoples, local communities on the ground, that there's a meaningful participation of civil society in bodies such like, in this case, an interdisciplinary expert committee. So something that's maybe a little bit different with the SPP for chemicals and waste is probably what hasn't been talked about, the need for a prioritisation of the work programme, because the nature of the issues are going to be very broad, as well as the people and scientists involved being very broad as well in those multidisciplinary technical areas of expertise. So if on the next slide, please. There's also mention within that kind of early ideas around what such a body might look like, who will choose the scientists who are involved, who will get involved in prioritising the work programme and the issues that the assessment groups will look at. Then you need that broad range of multidisciplinary expertise with inclusive participation. So that's what we're focused on in the Royal Society of Chemistry in the next quarter ahead of the discussions next year. Okay, next slide, please. What does it mean? Because we talk about what a broad range of multidisciplinary expertise means. In some areas, the breadth is narrower than it arguably is here in chemicals and waste. So what we're going to try and bring as experts, so myself, I sit in the UK as an independent scientific advisor, I have done for 11 years, on different committees involved in chemicals, waste and pollution issues. I have many colleagues around our Royal Society of Chemistry community in particular who have done the same over many years. So we're trying to give a practical flavour about what that broad range means for chemicals, waste and pollution in reality. Okay, next slide, please. So just as a flavour to show you how the science advisory landscape looks, there's a very nice document come out from the UK government in March showing just how many different science advisory groups are there to be called upon. These are scientists. So if you look at the top right-hand circle there, DEFRA is our environmental body in the UK, and all of the little lines and dots around that government department are the science advisors who sit in various groups advising government. And within each little dot on that, there may be 7 to 15 expert scientists in very different areas such as flooding, animal health, air quality, land quality, water quality, all different scientists coming together that ultimately their advice is integrated through mechanisms of science advice. And the Environment Department is the department that has the largest number of multidisciplinarians within it across air, land, water, waste, chemicals and waste pollution, etc. Next slide, please. So I don't want to be reductionist about this in any sense by saying, oh, you must have all these areas of experts in the panel for chemicals, waste and pollution. It's not about that. It's about just being aware of all the different non-overlapping science and technology disciplines there are in chemicals, waste and pollution. And as a chemistry body, so bringing it back to the RSC, chemists are often in those roles that are interacting with all the different other disciplines, because we're bringing chemistry data, chemical sciences data into multidisciplinary conversations and interacting with different experts from different fields. Also, as well, you know, science is, as has been mentioned, an international collaborative effort. So we're talking about chemicals, waste and pollution issues around the world. We have a great Pan-Africa chemistry network, for example, where we bring scientists from all the RSC community in the African regions together. There'll be a conference in October where we look at issues in a very multidisciplinary way. So what I'm trying to get across today as well is that a body like the Royal Society of Chemistry is not just focused on chemistry, not just focused on a small part of chemical sciences, but we also interact with other professional bodies, other disciplines such as physics, mathematics, biology. We interact with our sister societies around the world, as well as other chemical societies around the world. And so what we're trying to do is, as I say, be that network of networks. So this is just a first brainstorm from a few of us who are science experts in these areas, just to capture the many different types, including social sciences, including behavioral and psychological sciences, and arguably economic and political sciences in that breadth, as well as a whole range of natural science disciplines as well. So tomorrow, for example, we have our third Burlington Consensus event. We use our events and our platforms to bring these disciplines together with policymakers to discuss the issues of the day. And so tomorrow, for example, we've got an event of that kind where we will have multidisciplinarians in the room with policymakers. There's about 200 people coming to that event. So, yeah, next slide, please. So that's just a flavour of that. And to just make a point that there are new skill sets on the horizon here as well, because there are some areas now evolving of very brand new areas where people will have not heard about the science policy before. So we'll be raising awareness through our work to cell biologists, human biomonitoring specialists, exposome specialists, computational scientists as well. So I'll end it there, just to give you a flavour of all the different scientists involved.
Thanks very much, Camilla. That was fantastic. We'll now turn to the Children and Major Youth Group, or Youth Major Group, for UNEP, for Asil Abo Talib, who's going to talk about how early career researchers can engage with the ongoing work of the SPP. Thanks.
Distinguished delegates, members of the scientific communities, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning and afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us in this webinar. I am honored to be here with you today representing the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. I would like to begin by thanking the Secretariat of the WEG and the Geneva Environment Network for organizing this important webinar. It is now more critical than ever to strengthen the scientific engagement with the WEG, the Future Panel, and all multilateral and intergovernmental processes to address our global environmental challenges. And just earlier this week in New York, world leaders have already underscored the importance of collective action by adopting the Pact for the Future, which includes also a declaration on the future generations, and which makes it clear that overcoming our current challenging is not the responsibility of any single entity or group of stakeholders, but it's rather a shared duty that requires immediate action from all, and the scientific community plays a major role in this process. Before reflecting on the journey and perspective of CYMG regarding the WEG and the future SPP, I would like to congratulate Geneva Environment Network on their 25th anniversary. And this network has been instrumental in bridging the knowledge gap and connecting member states and all stakeholders by always providing young people opportunities to participate in critical dialogues and discussions. On behalf of CYMG, I extend my warmest wishes for successful celebration and many more achievements in the years to come. Next slide, please. So in this slides, I would like to highlight a bit about the Children and Youth Major, which is one self-organized network that is a member of the 9 major group of major groups and stakeholders to UNEP. CYMG has over 900 youth organizations with a combination of both accredited and non-accredited organizations to UNEP, and over 7,000 individual members. compromising all members that are committed to addressing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And as I mentioned, this constituency is one of the 9 major group and stakeholders accredited to UNEP, this structure that ensures diverse voices of the different groups of stakeholders to have a meaningful role in shaping environmental policy and action. Just a quick note that the major group systems got recognized after the 1992 Earth Summit and is defined by the Agenda 21 of the Rio Declaration. And as mentioned, it is very essential in promoting broad participation in the Sustainable Development Goals. And through this framework, the inclusion of non-governmental stakeholders and decision-making process can be facilitated. In the next slide, I would just very quickly go through the structure of the Children and Youth Major Group and how eventually in the next slides, I will also discuss how can early career professionals, young scientists be part of the work to the work process, to the SPB and to the future panel, and how we envision the future avenues of engagement. So the chemicals, waste and pollution and the science policy working groups are two dedicated working groups that are contributing to the work of the SPP. We have flat structures and an open membership process that any youth-led or youth-serving organizations or individual member can be part of the CYMG. In the next slides, would go through some aspects on how CYMG has been engaging in the SPP process. So we have been engaged in every single session of the working group meetings and also taking part of the regional preparations, responding to the calls for submissions by the working group and the secretariat. And we are committed to ensure that this panel and the future panel will offers a platform for everyone to participate meaningfully. That's by advocating for meaningful non-governmental stakeholders participations and informing the negotiations and the process in establishing the panel to integrate different operating principles that we have been advocating for intergenerational equity, ensuring the scientific integrity, credibility and inclusivity of the future panel. And this timeline shows some of the major milestones that we have taken part of with some virtual consultations and organized webinars, and also more significantly, a youth consultative meeting and in-person meeting prior to the weeks of negotiations. And that's got the early careers and young scientists participating in the negotiation to finalize their priorities and also to inform the negotiation. Next slide, please. So as part of the engagement with the work process, we have done a mapping and analysis of the existing science policy panels and different science policy interfaces to come up with some key recommendations that can be taken into consideration. And we advocate for establishing of a dedicated youth experts advisory group, and then also adopting innovative youth engagement, as well as building on the non-governmental stakeholders engagement strategy in a consultative process. And in this QR code, you can see some of the examples of the written submissions and the contributions that CYMG and our focus groups, that is consisting of different young scientists and PhD scholars, researchers, engineers, medical doctors, practitioners, and many other young people with lived realities and experiences contributing to the work process and also giving their perspective into the future panel. Next slide, please. So some of the examples that early career professionals can support the future panel, and these are few examples, and I want to flag here that what the Secretariat mentioned in the earlier presentation about the direct and indirect engagements that has been already part of CYMG rules in the process, and we have been contributing to raising awareness and then consulting with member states through focal points and observers participating in the different work sessions, etc. But one of also the potential rules that we can see early career professionals and young scientists taking part of the future panel and the final session of the resumed third session of the WEG is to see the integrating of the fresh perspectives and utilizing advanced technology. And we already recognize the importance role that young scientists bring into coming up with the ideas and creative solutions, and also to complement all the types of the existing knowledge systems. Advocating for intergenerational equity, and then contributing to global assessments and panel deliverables. And in the coming slides later on, I'll show some of the examples how CYMG, along with its members of the early career professionals and the focus groups, have been providing such contributions, and especially in translating key messages and engaging young audiences, and of course contributing to driving innovations and sustainable solutions. Next slide. So these are some of the examples that young scientists can contribute, and it's just one or two examples out of many we have seen in an earlier presentations, and also one of the outcomes of our mappings of the existing panels, including how chapter scientists and the youth fellows of the IPBES and the fellowship programs to the global environment outlook, and all the existing practices and good practices contributing to the different panels. The examples of this example of the Global Waste Management Outlook, which was launched earlier this year in the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. This outlook offers an updated assessment of the global waste management and analysis of the municipal solid waste management worldwide, and such of the deliverables we would envision the future panel to deliver and to build on. So in the next slides, we would like to show how we have taken part and collaborated with UNEP to jointly published a youth summary, and that aims to equip young people with the knowledge and tools to tackle waste management challenges, and also driving ambitious actions and getting everyone engaged. So our focus groups and a group of over 25 young scientists, volunteers, are also working on translating this important summary to 7 languages, including UN languages, Portuguese and Swahili, and also providing a plan for an outreach materials in the next slides. And prior to the 3rd session of the open-ended working group, CYMG has worked on a digital campaign focusing on highlighting and showcasing youth voices on the science policy panel, and by raising some of the youth views, engaging a diverse audience, and promoting the work of the SPP and the future and the existing science policy panels, with the content promoting personal stories, reflections, educational resources, and updates from the existing work. So those are some of the examples, and many other more. And those are, as I mentioned earlier, that with the flat structure that the network our CYMG has, it's very open for everyone that is willing to contribute and willing to take part of that. And one of the challenges that is always faced by the scientific communities or the early career professionals is that you might need an accreditation to the UN system to take part of this negotiations, or to take part and to interact with the different negotiations and the different processes. And here where it comes the role of the major group as an umbrella and official mechanisms, and with the support and help of our members organizations to UNEP, we have been providing accreditation support and providing contribution platform for everyone, even with those are not able to participate in person or take part of the negotiations in the rooms, to provide their inputs by the different session of consultations and the collecting periods of inputs that later on got consolidated and submitted as one collective view that reflect young people views in the process. And in the next slide, and I would almost conclude my presentation, I just would like to share this quote by the former UNEP Executive Director in 2017, presenting a report towards a pollution-free planet. They mentioned none of us is now safe, so now all of us have to act. Although these words spoken in 2017 resonate even more urgently today, and we still face an escalating planetary crisis of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss. The urgency for action has only get more intensified. It's now more than ever we need all expertise to address these global challenges and drive the solution. And in my last slides, next, I would like to invite you, if you know someone that is a PhD scholar, an early career professional or practitioner interested to join, or you are an organization that has a focus on youth leading or youth serving scope, please feel free to join our CYMG network by scanning this QR code or using the webpage. Thank you so much, and that's it for me. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Asil. Thank you very much for that. That was terrific. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of that presentation. Finally, we have Anna Isabel Becker, who is Policy Director at the International Sustainable Chemistry Collaborative Centre, who will do a presentation on Science Alliance on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you introduced me already, so we can skip over that. Yeah, my name is Anna Isabel Becker. I'm the Policy Director at the ISC3, and I'm among a group of committed people who facilitate the setting up of the SPP Science Alliance. And for the participants that might not have been involved at the Science Policy Panel process yet, we in this presentation would like to give some context and history of the Alliance, as well where we currently stand. Yeah, exactly the slide. So during this event today, we got already an overview on the SPP OEWG process. We heard on avenues, how to engage directly, indirectly, and we also got perspectives from other SPIs as well as from major groups. This is very helpful because now you know already that, for example, at OEWG2 in Nairobi, members of the Science and Technology Community Major Group were also present. And during this time, we noticed a lack of engagement and participation opportunities in the SPP process. We asked ourselves how it will be ensured that all relevant scientific knowledge holders are being considered. And we also asked ourselves if the SPP is even interesting to relevant scientists, or do peers even know about the SPP? So as an interim milestone at OEWG3 in Geneva, we jointly as a group took the decision that we want a more inclusive avenue and approach where a broader participation of interdisciplinary scientific experts would be possible. And the idea of the Science Alliance was born. Next slide, please. So what is the SPP Science Alliance about? The SPP Science Alliance is envisaged to be an international network of interdisciplinary and independent scientific and technical experts that they would seek to contribute with their range of expertise and experience. And this alliance will also be socially, geographically, and disciplinarily diverse, and would aim to capture the breadth of expertise needed to address global environmental issues. Next slide, please. So we are currently as well in the process of finalizing our draft mission and objectives. Our mission, this is still in process, but our current mission is to broaden the impact of scientific knowledge in policy on chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention. Our objectives are to firstly inform the work of the new intergovernmental science policy panel on chemicals, waste, and pollution prevention. Secondly, establish a network of scientists across all relevant disciplines. Thirdly, build the capacity of scientists to contribute to policy. And fourthly, to widen the inclusion of underrepresented experts in science and in policy within this process. Next slide, please. So yeah, how would an alliance look like and where do we stand now? As I already mentioned, we are currently in the process of establishing such an alliance. The alliance is currently run by a voluntary group of people that have been present at the conference in Nairobi. The setting up of the alliance is work in progress, but a future SPP alliance would be coordinated by a secretariat and roll out activities once it's established. Our overall goal right now is to set up governance structures, including policy guidelines, such as conflict of interest, membership guidelines, principles, bylaws, and so on. So here you see ongoing tasks throughout summer that are, for example, setting up a core team, setting up a volunteer team, defining working groups, and also developing in a joint process the already mentioned mission and objectives. A very important task at hand currently is the search for donors and host organizations on a global scale. Once the financing is found and set, the alliance can become operational and come to life. Next slide, please. I also want to provide some insights we got from a consultation we had among a group of people that became later the core team and volunteer team back in June 2024 in Geneva. Those were around 35 participants. And and this is basically the colleagues that are also currently involved in setting up the alliance. Disciplines you can see on the left side that were represented. Back there was, for example, science journalism, human toxicology, political science, environmental law, wildlife, ecotoxicology, social science, environmental chemistry, sustainable chemistry, or from chemical risk assessments. On the right side, you see where our group of people is currently coming from. As an example, they are coming from different regions from the world. We have Europe, North and South America there, and the Middle East. Nevertheless, currently many scientists are coming from European institutions, but our goal is to broaden representation and to ensure that all regions are appropriately represented on the long term. I'm also showing this to you because we want to show transparently the status quo, but we also want to point out the potential for tapping into new national networks and also new knowledge networks once we grow in the future. So this is also a call to action for you to join us, not now, but at later stage, because as I already mentioned, we are still setting up. Next slide, please. Yeah, so with regards to future activities, examples might include that, for example, the provision of strong, reliable network. This network of scientific experts can be consulted for inputs, for advice by decision makers across the SPP landscape, but also for anyone else who is interested in the topics of the SPP, for interested individuals. Also, we would like to operate such a platform for exchange. This can be done via activities such as event formats like policy and stakeholder dialogues, information sessions, webinars, expert workshops on specific topics to provide room for information and exchange among interested scientists and other stakeholders. Training measures could be developed to improve the understanding and communication between the science and policy sphere. Informative publications, such as, for example, policy briefings, science fact sheets. Those sort of products could be written to inform scientists across the world. But nevertheless, all of these still needs to be discussed and it needs to be defined. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm already coming to an end, but I hoped this at least helped you a bit to understand the spotlights of our work we are currently operating in. As I said, we are in the process. We are looking for funding and host organizations. Nevertheless, we also need to be, we need to be flexible as timelines, financial support, and so on remains to be seen. And yeah, I would like to call on you to please reach out to my colleague Shrika or to myself if you want to get more information. We are the coordinators of the Alliance. You can also see our contact details down there. You can also, just write us directly. In 2025, we are going to completely open up to further memberships and to anyone else interested in this scientific community and who is interested to join our initiative. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anna. That was really informative and it sounds like a very interesting initiative. So I look forward to following that. Unfortunately, we've seriously run out of time and I'm so sorry as moderator for that to have happened because there are a number of questions. So very, very quickly, I'm just going to take one or two which are related. And I'd like to ask Aida from IPCC and Marie from IPBES. So there've been a couple of questions about your processes, re-author selection and conflict of interest. Can you give a 1-minute response to that? So I'll ask Aida first. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. But first of all, I think it's important to mention that applications of author are submitted by focal points in general, but also observer organization or even bureau members. And the selection of author to draft the report is done after the scoping meeting, which after the scoping meeting approval by the panel. The scoping meeting provides guidelines for the report. And given that the selection is based on the expertise needed first, and also we take into account geographical balance, gender balance, and whether or not we have also tried to have a balance between people who are new in IPCC and people who were engaged in previous cycles, having all this balance. And it's several rounds of selection we are making with all bureau members and in a collaborative way. And yeah, it's the way it is done. I don't know if I answered to the question or maybe.
Yeah, and the conflict of interest, like applications are submitted and they're reviewed based on your conflict of interest policy, which you've documented, yes?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult and we need to tackle that. But the fact that it's not only one person doing the selection, we can try to overcome that, but we need to have direct, clear guidance on conflict of interest about auto selections, actually.
Okay, thanks, Aida. Marie, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I would add, we also think of the disciplinary selectioners. So there's a disciplinary balance that was very important, and often we need to kind of do gap filling to get when there's shortage of social scientists of various kinds, but also marine sciences, and it could be especially in natural science as well. I would also say that it's not just scientific expertise, but we also try to get in some practitioners, and by that I mean those who work in the policy sector, advanced one, we're often done with a PhD, but so we have those bridging knowledges as well, and indigenous and local expertise in indigenous and local knowledge. And we have process, I guess there's no time to describe it, how to ensure that we take care of indigenous and local knowledge holders, since English is the language and we need to pay attention for all over the world. And that goes also, I would say, with texts in Spanish, French, and certainly in Russian and other minor languages. So we have certain processes to consult groups that we haven't been able to reach. And as for ILK, you look into the ILK section of IPBES and you find kind of riches how we work.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. We've seriously run out of time. We do have, I know there are procedures and documentation that we can make available. The Secretariat have provided links to a number of the questions that have been asked. Please reach out to them if you've got additional questions. I would like you all to give a clap to our fabulous presenters. Thank you very much for your time and for giving us your experience and knowledge. And with that, I'll hand over to Diana.
Thank you very much, Andrea, also for the great moderation of this session, for all those who engaged, for the great questions that we received in the Q&A. And as mentioned, the Secretary will continue to answer your questions. We will soon again share the email where you can reach everybody. I just wanted to give bring to the attention of this community a few upcoming events that can be of interest. We are organizing various sessions and there were questions in the chat about the Plastics Treaty. On the road to Busan, which is supposed to be the last session of negotiations, we are organizing a series of events. You can see on the screen that 2 dates are already announced, but there are a few more events where we are going to launch reports and interesting discussions to have a timely also outcome of that negotiation. And also another event of interest for this community is the launch and panel discussion on a document on chemicals and waste issues of concern, taking place also soon in October, and there will be a few more events. With that, I would also to remind you that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this event, the Geneva Environment Network is celebrating its 25th anniversary. We have issued a call for video messages, so we encourage also people from the scientific community to send us their messages. And you have here a slide with the link, a QR code that you can scan on how you can share with us your messages. So with that, once more, thank you all for joining today. We are going to put again on screen the email, how you can join the Secretariat of the Open End Working Group. And we look forward to have you again. There will be a few more events in preparation of the next meeting of the Open End Working Group that will take place next year. But so by the end of this year, we will certainly have a few more sessions to engage with you and with other stakeholders in preparing for this event. So once more, thank you, Andrea. Thank you all the panelists. Thank you all the attendees and those who will later watch this video, and looking forward to see you at one of the upcoming events. Thank you.